Last minute tips, geniuses, before your test. So I have 10 tips for you today, 5 English tips and 5 math tips. So tip number 1 in English, my friends, is to always skip to number 15 in the English modules. So from 1 to 14, this is what I call the reading questions. Then from 15, we start the writing questions. From 15 all the way till the end of the module, you usually have the easier questions, the ones you can answer quickly, and the ones that are not as tricky as the first 14. So start with 15, finish till the end, and then go back, do from number 1 to 14. Also, this is a nice time-saving strategy because if we assume that you will not have enough time to do 2 or 3 questions on the module, if you just go from 1 in the regular order, you'll probably skip the last couple of note-taking questions, which are the easiest questions on the SAT. So if you start with 15, you finish all the way till the end, you've got all the writing questions, you've got all the grammar, punctuation questions, note-taking questions done, then you go back and do from 1 to 14. If you have to skip something, it will be the harder reading questions that you might get wrong anyway. All right, tip number 2 in English. Try to always look for 3 wrong answer choices and eliminate them instead of trying to look for the right answer right away. Now, sometimes, based on our practice, based on everything we do in our course, we can look at a question, look at the answer choice, and just choose the right one right away because we've seen this multiple times before. But in general, especially if it's a tricky question, if it's something that you find hard, try to look for 3 wrong answer choices, eliminate them first, and then the remaining one will be the correct answer. Tip number 3 in English. Don't read the notes on the note-taking question. So note-taking question, this is the last question, 2 questions, 3 questions in the module. It's when we have some notes, bullet points that a student has written, and then I ask you, or they ask you on the test, to find a certain part from the notes that conveys so-and-so, that shows so, that does something. And then you look at the answer choices. Now, you can safely ignore all of the citation, the passage, the notes, and instead focus on the keywords in the question itself, compare the keywords to the answer choices, and you'll probably get the right answer really quickly. 90% of the time, you do not need to read the actual notes. All right, English tip number 4. You don't have to read the whole paragraph under the graph question. So on the SAT test, usually when we have a graph question, you have a graph, then you have a paragraph underneath it, then you have a question. Now, you don't have to read the whole paragraph. Usually, the important information is in the last 1 or 2 sentences of the paragraph. Also, usually, we will have the paragraph with a blank, and the question is asking you to fill in that blank, to complete the sentence. The blank and the sentence that needs to be completed is usually the last sentence in the paragraph. So focus on that first, especially if you're tight with time. Number 5 in English, only spend about 30 seconds maximum on the sentence completion questions, the words in context questions, the vocabulary questions at the beginning of each module, okay? You make a quick decision, 30 seconds maximum. If you spend too much time, you will lose time that you may need to use on other questions because in vocabulary questions, you either know the meaning of a word or you don't. So spending too much time is just a waste of time. 5 tips for English done. All right, people, 5 math tips for your test. One of the things that a lot of students do, especially when the test is a digital test, an online test, is they try to work out the math for the question in their heads. Now, this is useful because it saves a lot of time. However, with most students, and you should try this at home, especially if you're stressed out and anxious during the test, when you work out numbers, even super simple numbers like 5 times 4, you can make a mistake in your head because of the anxiety that you will probably feel during the test. So always use paper and pencil. You'll have scratch paper, you'll have a pencil with you or a pen. Just use it for very simple math really quickly so you don't have silly mistakes that will make you lose points for no reason. All right. Number 2, tip number 2 in math. Use your calculator, your scientific calculator or your graphing calculator even for simple arithmetic, so that you don't make silly mistakes. So if you have something like 5,400 minus 2,300, I can easily do it in my head. I can also write it down on paper, but the easiest of the three would be number three, use the calculator. So this might seem like a waste of time, and it could be in some cases, so you need to try this at home frequently. But if you have your calculator to easily verify simple math so that you don't make mistakes, this is also always a good idea. Now, also practice using Desmos. All right, so this is tip number three. Practice using the Desmos calculator that is built into the digital SAT platform, the Bluebook app, because it's actually really useful and can help you in solving lots of questions, especially questions that have systems of equations, questions that have constants and complicated abstract algebra. You can really use Desmos for such questions, and you can visualize the answers. So practice using Desmos before the test. If you don't know how to use it at all, and your test is in 24 hours or something, then just forget about it. Use whatever you're used to. But for your next test, remember to practice using Desmos. Okay, tip number 4 in math, work backwards sometimes. So sometimes we have multiple choice questions where we can't really figure out how to approach the question. In this case, you can plug in the answer choices back into the original question and see which one works. Now, it's always a good idea to start with the middle options. So start with B or C, plug that in. If it works, B works or C works, you probably got the right answer right away and you've just saved some time. If not, sometimes the answer choices are arranged. So A is like the smaller number, B is a little bit larger, C is a little bit larger, D is the largest number. So if you start in the middle, this gives you an indication whether you, after B, you should try A, or after B, you should try C. So start in the middle, work backwards. Last tip, my friends, in math, tip number 5, if you have any remaining time in math, go check your work. Okay, well, we all know that, don't we? But how do you check your work? Here's what you need to do. Identify the questions that you were least confident when you chose the answer for those questions. So for example, if I look back, I have like 3 minutes left. I look at my math section, I still have some time and I've finished everything. Number 1, okay, I was 2 was confident, 3 was 4. This one I pretty much guessed, wasn't really sure. I don't feel really good about it. What do you do? What most people do is they just read the question, look at their answer and say, I think it looks good. That's not revision. Revision means redoing the actual question all over again. So forget about what you did the first time, just redo the whole thing. And then if you find a different answer, choose the second one. If you have the same answer as the first one, just move on. This is how we should revise. And if you have any extra time, always use it for revision. One last general tip for all your tests, for the next test and for every other test you'll ever take. Don't treat the test as one thing. Treat the test as a number of questions that are separate from each other. So like make it some kind of like a game where you have one question, you get it right, you get it wrong, it's over, you're never going to see it again. Now you're going to go to question number 2. You need to focus on the new question, right, wrong, never see it again, and so on. Don't try to think how many questions you got right in all of math, how many questions you got wrong in all of English. Don't think about the test as one whole thing while you're in the test, but think of each question as an individual test by itself. And once it's done, it's done. Got it, geniuses? Good luck.